We welcome back former teacher, current financial planner, and student loan expert, David Gourley. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back with you guys once again.
We always enjoy our conversations. David, in one word, describe the state of student loans.
Chaos. There's no question. It's a messy spot right now, and I think that a lot of people have questions about what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future, and I hope that this podcast helps people get some clarity. And the other thing is that they might. The truth is that it might not be a lot of clarity because we don't know what's going to happen in the horizon, but at least some clarity for today.
We think this is so important for our audience. Scott said off air that this is the first time he has not prepared questions for a podcast because we feel like there is so many moving parts. And this is why we are so glad to have you. I think we should start off with public service loan forgiveness program. And can you start with where did the Biden administration leave it? So, like on January 19th, where was it? And then you can roll into proposals, maybe things that have been enacted, where we think it might be going.
Yeah, so the very first thing to state is that PSLF is not going away. It's here. You still have the same requirements that were there before, which is basically, I'll run through those real quick. You have to have direct loans. You have to work for 120 and make 120 qualifying payments and work for a public service employer. And you have to be on an income driven repayment plan or the standard repayment plan and not a consolidated version of like you can't have consolidated loans and be on the standard repayment plan. It has to be a standard repayment plan with non-consolidated loans. So if you meet all of those requirements, PSLF is still very much in place. There are still people that are getting their loans forgiven even within the last couple of days. I've been getting some emails. So it does happen. It's still working. Now, the question on PSLF moving forward is who is going to qualify? And that's kind of the big thing that I don't think as of right now teachers have to worry about, but they are working diligently in the higher ups to figure out who qualifies as a nonprofit. Do hospitals qualify? Will they qualify in the future? So there are some question marks as to certain industries whether PSLF will be a viable option in the future. But with teachers working in the public servant role, I don't think that it's anything that anybody needs to be worried about right now.
Okay, that's some excellent information. Now, there was a statement put out by the administration saying that they're proposing changes for organizations with substantial illegal purpose. And they mentioned things like violating immigration laws and supporting terrorism or I'm almost laughing. It's super serious, but I'm almost laughing that this is something they're targeting or trafficking children. Please tell me, David, we are not forgiving loans for people who are engaged in terrorism and trafficking children.
I think a lot of times what gets put out at the top and what actually happens is two completely different things. It's easy to make a tweet or a truth social post and say something's going to happen or put it into a bill and but the truth is that I don't see it affecting teachers right now. Now, could that change in the future? I don't know. That's anybody's guess. But with the information that we have today, teachers are safe with public service loan forgiveness. Now, one of the questions that you asked is where was it left before? And back last year in 2024, we had the IDR waiver that was wrapping up, and it finished in on June 30th of 2024. And after that time, it has become a lot more challenging and more difficult to get previous credits to count. You have to have met the criteria. So you have to have direct loans. You can't have those old FFEL loans that a lot of people still have hanging out that didn't realize they needed to do that consolidation before June 30th. There with the IDR waiver though, they count a lot of payments in the past that you may not have known about. So there are still opportunities out there where teachers could be sitting on their golden ticket still and they still might not know that they have it. And what they would have to do is submit that employer verification form, that employment verification form. We call it the PSLF application. It's kind of one and the same. But if they submit that for time that they didn't previously have counted, there's still a chance that some of that time can count now.
Okay. And we should remind the audience, we're talking public loans. These are not private loans. These are public loans. I'm sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I literally have a client that I'm working with, and that David analyzed their information. They were not eligible because they didn't have direct loans. However, if they had known about this over a year ago, they might have been able to do something about it. This particular client did not even know what PSLF was. She knew that there were loan forgiveness programs, but she had no idea what PSLF was. And so if I am begging you, listeners, talk to your colleagues. They might not know. And you don't have to talk about the 403B if you don't want to, but talk to them about PSLF. Make sure they know about it. Because like David just said, they might have a golden ticket.
And those old loans, those FFEL loans, they actually stopped giving those completely in 2010. So anybody who borrowed from 2010 and after has direct loans 100% if they're federal loans. And so a lot of these people will be sitting on these things from 2010 until now. Well, this is 15 years ago. It seems like 2010 was just yesterday, right? But I was just a couple of years out of college at that point, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still a college guy. No, I'm almost 40. So 15 years, if they've been working during that time frame, even if they were in some time frames of forbearance or deferment, that's where that IDR waiver really comes into play. Because if they had 12 consecutive months of forbearance or 36 aggregate months of forbearance, they went in and flipped a switch and allowed those months to count as credit for PSLF. And a lot of people will come to me now and say, okay, well, I know that IDR waiver is over. I don't qualify. And then I'll look back through and we'll get onto the PSLF payment tracker that you can find at studentaid.gov. And they will show those months as eligible, but needing employment verification. And I'm like, all you have to do is just get this form signed by your wherever you were working at that point in time and turn it in. And those months will switch from being eligible to being like actually counting qualifying payments.
David, and just as a reminder, so during COVID, student loans were paused. Is that correct? That's forbearance. And this is also what you're talking about. Those months that it was paused can actually count, or do I have this wrong?
Those months counted no matter what. Those months count as months of payment. What I'm referring to is that before 2020, there would be times where people would go into this forbearance state. And the original idea of having a forbearance is it's supposed to be a 6-month deal where you can get up to 6 months of time where you don't have to make payments. Maybe you're going through a job change. Maybe you have a family situation, and the government says, we know that things come up. We're going to give you a little relief during this time. Now, the issue is that it got blown way out of control, which because these loan servicers have no clue what they're doing half the time. And so people would stay in forbearance for sometimes 2, 3, 5 years and not ever move from this forbearance state. Those were not counting as, this is all pre-2020 again. Those were not counting as any sort of credit. They were not counting as payments. That's what the Biden administration did, was they said that with the IDR waiver, that with those 12 months consecutive or 36 months aggregate, they can now count as credit, and then some deferment as well. So deferment is it's all coding inside of the student loan system, but there's another code called deferment. And as long as it was not deferment for going back to school. So an in-school deferment is a little different, but if you had deferment from 2013 or earlier that was not in school deferment, those months count as credit now as well. That can be there, it's eligible credit. And then if you were working at the same time, then it can count as a qualifying payment.
What should someone do? They're listening to this, they believe that they qualify under what you described. Who do they contact? Their loan servicer? Do they have to get something from their employer? What do they do?
I would just have them say, fill out that PSLF application, which you can do on studentaid.gov/PSLF. They have it all where you can do it online now too. So as long as they know their employer identification number, that's kind of the hardest one to find is that EIN. But if they have that information and the person who signs off on it at their employer, usually somebody in HR from the school district, if they have that information, they can do it all online and never have to print anything. And it's really quick. It's a DocuSign that goes to their employer, and they look it over and say, like, yep, this person was here during the times that they stated. They'll click a button on their end. It'll go to the Department of Education, and then they can update their PSLF payment tracker. And the other thing is that you won't see that PSLF payment tracker on studentaid.gov if you've never submitted one before. But as soon as you submit that first one, there will be a list of all of your qualifying, eligible, and ineligible months of credit, basically, of every month that's gone by that you've had student loans. And to kind of further that conversation even more, those months that show up as ineligible, those were months that you cannot get credit for PSLF until the PSLF buyback. So that option is still out there. It's still a thing that is working right now. So if you were working at an eligible employer and you had a month that shows up as an ineligible, you can buy that month back once you hit 120 total months of employment.
How does that work? What is that? Do you literally have to pay a fee to buy it back? How does that work?
You do. So essentially what you have to do is go into the studentaid.gov, and there's a word that it's just slipping my mind right now, but reconsideration. You have to submit for a reconsideration. And there's very specific language that they have on student aid webpage where you can just copy and paste it. But it essentially says, I have time that I want for you to look at my PSLF buyback time frame. They will go in and look at those months of your ineligible months of service, and they may request a tax return from that period of time as well to figure out your family size and everything else. And they will give you an offer letter, basically, that says, we are going to give you, we'll give you these months of credit if you pay $3,000, for example. And you have a set period of time where you have to agree to the terms of their contract and make the payment for those months. And then you will get those months of credit to count as well. Again, for this one, you have to be at 120 months of total employment. Basically, you're ready to have your loans forgiven, and then they will do this. What the Biden administration said before the end of the year was that at some point in time in the future, you'll be able to do this PSLF buyback even if you don't hit the 120 right now. But that has not been something we've seen so far.
Yeah, because it seems like it'd be better if you could do the buyback in advance, because otherwise you'd be continuing to make payments past 120 months.
They'll refund your payments. I know that one's a
okay.
one. That's a scary one because it's putting some trust into the system working. But I have not seen a PSLF buyback come through just yet. So what they've done is they had a test group that they did this with at the end of last year, and they were trying to work out the kinks, basically, of the PSLF buyback option. And so they had a test group that they did it with a very small group of people. And then they were going to push this out to everybody else at some point. And I don't know when they're going to push it out to the masses, right? So there's been a lot of people who have submitted the buyback that have not gotten that application yet to be able to actually complete the process. That is something also that I would be very concerned about staying long-term, because it's not written into any sort of law. It's just a here's something that we should do. And I think that one could go away likely when we're talking about trying to, doge the student loan system. Like, that's an easy place to doge.
It seems like, excuse me. Well, it seems like the direction is to make things much more difficult and to make it harder not only to get loans but and to get them forgiven. I mean, at least that seems like the direction, which is obviously the exact opposite of where we were. Is
I
that accurate?
I think that, yeah, I would say yes, but with an asterisk. I think that it's a lot easier than where it was pre 2020.
Yeah.
And then with the PSLF limited waiver and the IDR waiver, we had some months there where it was just insane, right? Like loans were being forgiven left and right. And people that heard about this through your guys' podcast and a variety of other places that they could get this information could go in there and get their loans forgiven after they've been sitting on them for 20 plus years, right? And we're now at a point where I think that it's easier to get your loans forgiven than it was, but there's still a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. And it's really a lot of, you have to know the rules and you have to know how to navigate them, which is challenging.
Do you think the New York Times article that came out all those years ago, sort of exposing the program as a fraud, even though it wasn't technically a fraud, it was just people not really knowing the rules? I mean, in that respect, it was a bit of a fraud. But do you think that article helped loosen the system in a way so that like it was taken seriously by maybe government officials? Like, hey, yeah, maybe we've made this too difficult to do. We need to make it a little bit easier. Do you think that had anything to do with, how this has gone over the last few years?
I'd say that's too challenging for me to know, but I will say that one of the biggest things that article did a disservice of is that it did a lot of disservice because there's people that won't even pursue public service loan forgiveness after hearing certain talking
Yeah.
heads.
Yeah.
Some of them rhyme with like Smave Smamsy, who says that PSLF doesn't work at all and you can't trust it. One of the issues is that the PSLF application is the employer certification form, right? It's the same thing. It's one and the same. I advise people to update that once a year just to have it on record and get the credits to count from the previous year, right? So you've worked for a year, you submit the PSLF application, you get the 12 months of credit counted. If you do that 10 times, right? If you do that every single year for 10 straight years, let's say that you have no breaks in your student loan journey and you get forgiven at the end of your 10th year, that means that you submitted 9 applications that didn't process PSLF, and you did submit one that did get you. So
the
right off
numbers
the
are
bat, if
skewed.
you're doing everything correctly, you alone are showing a 10% return of people who actually get PSLF. And so that was one of the big misconceptions, is that they said 1% of people are getting their loans forgiven. Well, they started in 2007 and they did this study in 2017. Yeah, of course, there's only 1% because you've got hundreds and hundreds and millions of people who are submitting applications yearly that we know aren't going to count because they're just doing it to update their credits.
By pure math, 90% are going to be rejected. And by 2017, it was impossible to have a student loan forgiven. So of course the numbers would be incredibly skewed. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I think my opinion would be that the article overall did more harm than it did help. But just because there's so many people that say you can't trust the PSLF system, and there's so many people that paid on their loans and went hard on them. Whereas if you're a teacher and I talk to people about looking at their student loans like a monthly utility bill, right? Where it's like you have a $200 or $300 bill. You may have $100,000 in loans, but if you follow the PSLF system and you do everything that you're supposed to do, you may pay $20,000 or $30,000 and get the rest of it forgiven. And so look at it like you've got a monthly bill for a set period of time, and then the rest will be forgiven, rather than thinking about it like you've got that $100,000 hanging over your head. Right. If you don't think that the system's going to work and you just go and pay $80,000 on your loans and then get a smidge forgiven at the end, like, did that help anybody or did that actually hurt people overall?
Yeah, no, I 100% see what you're saying. That makes sense.
So we've talked about PSLF, we've talked about the buyback option. I think a lot of people probably want to know what repayment plans are even available right now. And I will start with that the save is dead in the water. Save plan is dead. Like it's going away. What will happen with it is a good question that nobody knows the answer to right now. Because there's over 8 million people that are still stuck in the save repayment plan. And at the end of this thing, when they finally figure it out and it goes through all the legal proceedings and all that, which who knows how long that's going to be too, right? So, but are they going to take people and push them into, are they going to force everybody into a different repayment plan? I don't know. Which one are they going to force people into? I don't know. But I can say that with pretty darn good certainty that I don't think SAVE is going to be around long term. The repayment plans that are available right now are ICR, IBR, and Pay. And the interesting thing about IBR is that there's an old version and a new version. And the new version started in 2014. And each of these repayment plans has its own terms as far as using that federal poverty guideline. So how much you can deduct from your adjusted gross income. And they also have the percent of your adjusted gross income that they actually use to determine your payment calculation. It's different for each repayment plan. So it's very, very challenging to try to figure out, which repayment plan should I be on. The two that are the best are going to be Pay and the new IBR, but you can only qualify for those if you have student loans from certain timeframes. So the other aspect of this is that moving forward, this is kind of getting into some of the what ifs, and we don't have all the answers yet. But a bill has been proposed by the House GOP that basically has a new repayment plan. And what they're suggesting in this is that everybody who is not on the new repayment plan gets taken out of all of the old repayment plans and shoved into the old IBR. Okay, so there's no Pay, there's no ICR, there's no new IBR, there's just the old version of the IBR. And this one is going to get complicated. It always does when I talk about these things. But the old IBR is the 1.5 times the federal poverty guideline for your family size, and a 15% of your adjusted gross income. So what that's going to do for anybody who's on Pay or new IBR is it's going to bump their payments up higher. They're going to pay more. The other, so that's kind of what we're looking at potentially for the future. But again, that probably won't even happen until at least 2026. And that's assuming that any of this stuff goes through. And it hasn't been voted on. This is the bill that I'm going to talk about here in just a second is the House GOP, and the Senate GOP is probably going to come up with their own bill. And will it look similar? Will it look different? And then they're going to have to try to figure out how to commingle these things to actually get it to pass through. So right now, the information that has been thrown out there is just the House GOP bill, and it has not been voted on. It has not been approved, nothing like that.
I found details on the SAVE plan. I almost don't want to read it out loud.
Oh, yeah.
I will just read one point, and I think this is what, if you make your monthly payments, interest won't build up on your student loan balance. I feel like that's the least we could do for borrowers.
So it's interesting because that's what the House GOP has in their new repayment plan. They have that provision as well.
Okay.
So there is that one, like it's kind of a golden thing inside of their new repayment plan. But we'll talk about that here in a second.
Especially with these higher interest rates, right? We now have.
Crazy.
I mean, as someone who literally paid almost 5 times what my student loans were, all, mostly interest. It's important that we have that we do something here, whether it's save or a new payment plan. And I think the other thing that people don't realize when people are getting their loans forgiven is that these are people who have not just paid back the money that they borrowed. Many of these people have paid back multiples of the money they borrowed before the forgiveness has been offered. These aren't freeloaders. And I think that really bothers me when I hear these, oh, these people are just getting free. Yeah, I mean, some are getting some pretty dang good deals. Like maybe there needs to be a cap. But like, I mean, I paid, and yeah, I didn't get any loan forgiveness. I'm not complaining about it. But like I have a son, he has student loans. He's going into education, and he's part of the Save repayment program. Like, what does the future look like for this program? I want to know. And we're like in this limbo area, David, right?
Yeah, and right now those save repayment, the forbearance, we use that term, we've used it several times already today, but the save forbearance is completely different than the other forbearances because it does not count for PSLF credit right now. The buyback is a potential option for the future for anybody who's on the save forbearance of getting that buyback, in place. But will that be around long term? That's the question that nobody really knows the answer to.
So you have people who are literally stuck. Like they might have been a few payments away, maybe, and they're in save for whatever reason, I guess. Or I explain that. Is there
At this point, so there's been a lot of things over the last couple of months, right? But at one point back in April, all consolidations were shut down. You could not do a consolidation. All repayment plan changes were shut down. You could not change repayment plans. That has been lifted. So we can at least change repayment plans now. So if somebody's sitting at like 118 in your example, if they've got two more payments to make, it would be probably in their best interest to look at jumping over to IBR or pay, making those two payments, and then submitting the PSLF application.
okay? Okay.
The other thing is that in that same situation, if they're at 118 right now and they've been on the save forbearance, I've had some people who have gone in and submitted that PSLF buyback because they've hit the 120 mark, and then they're just waiting to get that buyback offer. And there's still that period of limbo. And basically what I've told them is if the buyback works, then you don't have to do anything. If the buyback doesn't work, then we need to jump repayment plans, get you just across the finish line. Maybe you make two payments that are a little bit higher than what you were expecting before, and we get those loans forgiven. So it's the at this point in time, the question mark for a lot of people is, do I stay on save or jump over to the other repayment plan? And it changes from person to person with their risk tolerance, right? Do they want to take more risk and say, maybe the save plan will work itself out? I don't think it will, but maybe, and stay in that boat. Do they want to have a guaranteed where they say we're making a payment and it's counting for PSLF now versus a potential buyback in the future? So there's so many, there's not a single set right answer. It kind of depends on the timeline. It kind of depends on what they want to accomplish as well.
I really appreciate your expertise on this, David. It is so ridiculously complicated. I'll admit something that I have never admitted. I've been doing financial planning now for let's see, I think I got my CFP in like I don't know, 2000, 2001, something like that. And I've been doing financial planning, I don't know, since 1998. I have I have learned so much about Medicare, Medicaid, the ACA. I have learned about taxes and like just esoteric areas of financial planning. 403B, 457. I know all of these intricate, crazy rules. I am awful when it comes to student loans. I know maybe less about student loans than some of the people who are listening to this podcast right now, which is embarrassing for me to admit, but it just gives me a headache. I hate it, but it is so important. And the reason that I am completely able to ignore this is because anytime I have an issue, I hire someone like you. I can hire someone like you to do this work for me. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that they have that option as well, that there are some experts out there. I am obviously not one of them. But there is help for this very difficult area of the market.
my thing is that I've been doing financial planning for a lot shorter time period than you have, but I am incredibly curious when it comes to things, especially with the student loans. And I think that curiosity I think that's one of the superpowers, right? Is like anytime there's a change, which happens weekly, right? Or sometimes daily, and just being curious to follow it, because it is it's a world in itself.
Yeah.
And if you're not curious about it and you don't stay up on top of it, it's very easy to get lost because it changes so quickly.
Yes, that is exactly right. Okay.
I think that the next spot that would be beneficial to talk about is what that new proposal is and
Okay.
just what that could look like potentially. And with this, I would say up front that nothing is set in stone right now, right? So we will probably do an update at some point in the future where when things get more solidified. But I think that this is a good starting point of at least knowing what could be coming down the pipe a little bit. So the entire thing is wrapped up in this College Cost Reduction Act, which is HR 6951, if anybody wants to look it up. And essentially inside of this thing, there are going to be two repayment plans. And the first one is called the standard repayment plan. And it's a mix of what we currently call the standard repayment plan and what we currently call the extended repayment plan. And basically what they're doing is they're taking your amount that you owe and they're baking the interest into it, and you're going to pay over a set period of time. And by the time you get to the end of it, you should pay off your entire student loan balance, just like the standard repayment plan is right now. You pay for 10 years, and at the end of those 10 years, your balance is gone and you're done. They have a set period of time based on the amount of your initial loans. So if you took out $25,000 or less, or $24,999 or less, you would have a 10-year repayment window. $25,000 to $49,999, you've got a 15-year repayment window. $50,000 to $99,999, you've got a 20-year repayment window. And then anything over $100,000, you've got a 25-year repayment window. So it just takes your repayment and says, okay, we know what we're going to pay over the next blank years based on how much you have in loans. And at the end of it, you're done. This is not a PSLF option. So this is just like the standard and extended version that we have right now. There's really no change in it, except that the standard repayment right now is a set 10-year period. And the extended right now does that same thing where it breaks it up based on the amount of loans that you have over a period of time up to 25 years. So there's not a whole lot of difference in this plan. It's just that they took several different repayment plans and kind of consolidated them down into one, which actually in my mind makes sense anyways, based on the amount. Like if you've got, $60,000 in loans, the standard repayment plan is what everybody comes out in right now, which is a set 10-year period. And those people will get that first bill and the bill is like, hey, you owe $2,500 this month. And they're like, oh my gosh. And then they figure out a different repayment plan really quickly after that, right? Because you get that oh shit face. And so this one actually makes a lot of sense to me. Do you guys have any questions on that one?
No. That's
Okay.
that's basically the plan that I had. And then I was poor and starting a new business, made no money, had a child, couldn't pay back the loans, and so they went into forbearance or deferment, and just interest capitalized and capitalized and capitalized until I finally had money to start paying on them.
The one thing that this new repayment plan does not have is what's called the graduated repayment plan. And that is one of them
Right.
that we have right now. I think it's going to be taken away from us. And that one actually does a lot of disservice to, especially to the people that we're talking to, teachers. And the reason why is that the graduated repayment plan will start off looking like the best option because it's the lowest monthly payment out of the gate. But it has it's a step up basically, where every 2 years it steps up to a higher repayment for 20 to 25 years. And the problem with it is it's built for somebody who's going to see massive increases in pay over the longevity of their career. Think doctor or lawyer or dentist or veterinarian or somebody like that, who may come out of college and not be making very much, like in a residency program or something. And then at some point in time, they're going to get that big payday and they're going to make a lot more. I see a lot of teachers that get on this though, thinking, oh, I'm going to take the lowest repayment option today. And then, 10 years out, all of a sudden these payments have graduated up to a point where they can no longer afford them on their salary because they're not going from $40,000 a year to $400,000 a year. And
no, they're not.
And so that one is not a repayment. It's not an option on this new, on the proposal at least. And I think for educators, when we're just talking about, the people in our world, it's actually a good thing that's being taken away, because that carrot was being thrown out there and a lot of people were jumping on it and then getting kind of screwed over later on. So that's the first one. The second one is called the Repayment Assistance Plan, and its acronym for short is RAP. And I know that Dan's going to want a rap at some point in time, so I'll have to figure something out and present a rap. But this one does qualify for PSLF, and it's based on your adjusted gross income. Your payment is based on your adjusted gross income. And they've said already that you are allowed to file married filing separately and only have your income counted, which is a really big benefit as well. It's all based on your AGI, and they've broken it into $10,000 increments, right? So if your AGI is under $10,000, then you pay $10 a month on your plan, so $120 a year. If your AGI is between $10,000 and $20,000, then you would pay 1% of your AGI spread out over 12 months. If, let's jump ahead a little bit though, because most of our listeners are not going to be having an adjusted gross income of $10,000 to $20,000. So let's jump all the way out to like $60,000 to $70,000. That's going to be 6% of AGI, right? And so on and so forth. So when you look at this, it's not as quite as scary as it originally kind of sounded, because they're taking away save. This is going to be also what they're proposing, at least, is that anybody who takes out loans after July 1st, 2026 will automatically be in this, and old IBR will no longer be an option. Anybody who has loans already out will get to choose which repayment plan they want to be in. And I still think, go ahead.
Quick question. What if you are in between? You took out some loans prior to this date. You said, was it June or July 26, you said?
July 1st of 2026.
July 1st, so of 2026. What if you have taken loans on either side of that date?
Yeah, you'll be grandfathered into the old IBR, where you'll have the option to choose that old IBR plan, or you can choose that new RAP.
Asking for a child, I know.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, we got to make sure that the kids are taken care of too. So it's not as good of payment terms overall, but it's not awful, honestly. So, and then the other part of this is that they will, so this is kind of the interesting part. There's going to be a $600 credit for each child that you have. So when we think about it, for $600, when you divide that by 12, it's $50 a month that will come off of your monthly payment for each child that you have. So instead of doing the federal poverty guideline, where you have to look at your family size and do a multiplier, like the old repayment plans, it would just be a set amount of $50 or $100 or $150 per month based on how many kids you have. There's no interest growth at all. So that's probably, in my opinion, the number one point of this, or the number one good point of this repayment plan. No interest growth. The other one that was kind of interesting is that if your payment doesn't cover, let's say that you've got a massive amount of student loans and your payment is just, you've got a smaller payment. If you don't make at least $50 of principal payment, the government will subsidize that and pay up to $50 a month on your principal balance per month. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it. If you're not on the PSLF track, instead of the 20 to 25 years to forgiveness that was being offered before on the IDR plans, this is a 30-year forgiveness track. And so that's going to be substantial for people that don't get PSLF, which hopefully most of our listeners, if you have a balance that you're going to be paying for 30 years anyways, that means that you've got a substantial amount of student loans. And so hopefully anybody who's in our ecosystem gets PSLF. The other thing that, and I don't know this for 100%, but what I was reading on, it looks like that if you had loans from before 2026 and you choose this repayment assistance program, that you won't be able to unchoose it. So this is where the planning aspect is going to come in big time for a lot of people. Is you can choose, and again, I don't know whether all this is going to go through or not, but if it does, you would be able to choose old IBR or choose the repayment assistance program. But if you choose the repayment assistance program, you won't be able to go back. Is kind of how I was reading this. There's some questions that I have that were unanswered in my findings so far. And one of those, I'll kind of go through some of the questions on my mind, and then we'll talk about one other thing that's kind of a big point to make. But the first one is what will happen to borrowers who are currently on SAVE? There's been no talk about that so far. So will they be forced into IBR? Will they be forced into this new plan, the repayment assistance program? Will they have the option to choose? It's been crickets on that front. The other biggest one is, what will Parent Plus borrowers do? There are so many Parent Plus borrowers right now who struggle with making payments. The amount of loans that you can take out as a Parent Plus borrower is unreal. Yeah. And right now, we had talked about before that double consolidation loophole that's ending in July of this year. So it's all but done. The only repayment plan that's available for Parent Plus borrowers to get on for an income driven plan is that income contingent repayment plan. They're talking about getting rid of that. So where do Parent Plus borrowers go, and what are going to be the terms of that? And it has not been, I have not seen at least that being talked about at all. That 30-year forgiveness, if you don't get PSLF, will it have that tax bomb like the current? So if you get forgiveness on the IDR plan and you're not on PSLF, right now there's a tax bomb that we call at the end, which is basically where you can have all of your loans forgiven after 20 to 25 years, but it counts as income in the year of forgiveness. That's crazy, right? Like if you have a $200,000 loan or 300 or 400, like interest compounds on these things, and these people get these loans forgiven.
It's mostly interest that's being forgiven.
Almost entirely.
Yeah. And
I've seen some heartbreaking scenarios, but where people have $600,000 in loans when they started out with $100,000 from 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And so they're planning I don't even know if they're actually planning, but where I talk to them about is like, hey, when these things get forgiven, that's going to count as income in that year of forgiveness. And that's insane to think about, especially if you're living like in a high tax state too, where you're paying federal tax, you're paying state tax, all of these things. So that was not talked about though inside the bill. Is, will the 30-year forgiveness be taxable? I have to assume yes, but I don't know. And then the last question that I have that I don't know the answer to is that $50 child credit. They say that you can file separately. Will each spouse be able to count the children separately then if they file separately? Because right now you actually can. So if you file separately using one of the old repayment plans, you both can count your children. It's supposed to be based off of your tax return, but they're not doing it like that right now. Again, because sometimes we use the loan servicers, they're such a mess, right? And we use that sometimes to our advantage as well. Hey, we can make this work for us. So the big thing to note, though, is that one more time, I want to make sure it's crystal clear on this one. This is not set in stone. These are just proposals. They have not been voted on. This is the House GOP bill. There has not been issued a Senate GOP bill yet. And I think just in the chatter that I've heard from student loan lawyers and people who are on the inside of this thing is that the Senate will propose something as well. And the last part about this is the reason why. Because one of the big pieces of this bill, and it's called the College Cost Reduction Act, right? So they're trying to figure out how can we make this cheaper for the government. But one of the big proposals is limiting the amount of money that you can borrow. And They're talking about an undergrad limit. The maximum that you can borrow would be $50,000. Parent plus $50,000. Graduate school loans up to $100,000, and professional loans up to $150,000. The other thing that I'm not 100% sure about is that aggregate, or can you say 50,000 for undergrad and then another 100,000 for graduate, another 150,000 for professional? I believe it's aggregate. So what that would mean is, like, if you took out the max for undergrad of $50,000 and you wanted to become a doctor, well, those programs are not going to keep you at $150,000. And kind of the chatter inside of the student loan community is like, if there's this limit to the amount that you can borrow, number one, private loans are going to go skyrocketing, which is not a good thing, because private loans, I see all the time, people who have private loans with interest rates at 13, 15, 16%. Like, how can you ever get out of a loan that's 16% if you've got $50,000? And so that's one thing, is that private loans will likely, and it's the government basically getting it off their plate and putting it onto somebody else's plate, right? They're saying the banks and lenders are going to be the ones responsible for this, not the federal government. The second thing is this could be a big trickle down, because if you have limits on borrowing, well, then you have less people who are going to be able to borrow, and less people that are going to be able to go into the programs, which means programs are going to get shut down, which means higher education is going to be, there's going to be less people in schools overall, or less people that qualify to get into schools. So it's going to be a tricky situation moving forward.
I wonder if the generous way to look at this is, and I didn't even think of the private loan side, and I think this is probably why they want to do it, but does it put price pressure on colleges? But
100%.
and I think that could be a good thing potentially.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think that one of the issues, if we're just talking about issues with student loans in general, is that when you have public service loan forgiveness, for example, they can charge whatever they want if they know that at the end of 10 years that loans can get forgiven. And then it just creates this system where, college costs more loans taken out, more loans get forgiven, and you spin it in a circle over and over and over, right?
Is that moral hazard? Is that what that's called?
Yeah. Isn't that also sort of what plus loans do?
What do you mean by that?
Because they have a much larger their limit.
Essentially, yeah. So you would still be able, but I think the cost of those programs has been so high in the past that it still wouldn't cover the full. Like, no doctor is going to be able to get any sort of degree for $150,000.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And so then they're going to have to figure out either lean on family or try to qualify. And the thing is that in order to get a lot of these private loans, I see a lot of people that have to have cosigners and things like that. And so who can cosign on a loan? And then we could have a whole conversation on, like, equity and who can get into these positions where you can take out certain private loans.
Yeah, I absolutely. I know exactly where you're going. So, okay, let me switch topics a little bit. Educators, the way educators get paid more is not through being better teachers. You would think you get paid more for just working another year, but also for moving up the salary schedule. And so for most educators, it makes, especially for the retirement, it makes an incredible amount of sense to invest, and I literally mean the term invest, in a master's degree or some sort of graduate degree that gets you to the end of the salary column. So I have to imagine there's a lot of our listeners right now who probably have a bachelor's degree and are looking at getting a master's degree. What advice would you give them on the student loan front in regards to, how they should be taking out student loans and whether or not, they should pursue PSLF?
This is an interesting question, because I think it comes down to more about the point that you made at the beginning, which is that you can't move up on the salary schedule unless you get these advanced degrees. So I think that it would be a bigger conversation of what are you trying to accomplish with your degree. Let me use myself as an example. I've got a master's in education and I've got a specialist. The only reason that and by the way, I invested in myself and then I quit like a year and a half later. So, so I didn't get the full return on that investment, I don't think, but pretty close. But my whole goal with getting those advanced degrees was 100% to move up on the salary schedule. I did not care what degree I was pursuing. I did not care what the reason was or what the thing was. My specialist is in building administration, but I had no interest in being a building administrator, and I still don't, by the way, because there's complications with that. Oh my gosh, I've seen and talked to so many of my clients right now who are administrators. I'm like, I'm so happy that you chose to do that because it's not something I wanted to do. So when I was looking at programs, though, the cost disparities are insane. I was looking at programs in my area, and some of them were 20,000, some of them were 30,000, some of them even higher than that for getting a master's degree, and some of them, then it's an additional, I think it was 30 credits to get the specialist, and it would have been another, 20, 30, $40,000. I found a program that was 100% online at the time. This was back in 2014 or 2015, maybe. And it was Arkansas State University, all online, kind of a self-paced type program where we still met regularly, but like once a week, but you could do the modules on your own type of thing. And it was $7,500 for the master's. And then by the time that I got to the specialist, it was like $8,200, something like that. The entire reason why I did it again was not to learn the material. I didn't care. Right. I wanted to bump up on the salary schedule.
Yeah.
Now, somebody out there may say, oh, that's BS. You should have cared about the material. And that's probably true. There should maybe be some of that. And if you are trying to pursue a degree where you are going to use the information to better, yourself or your career, maybe that's something that you should be looking into. But there are other, and by the way, nobody batted an eye at district office whenever I submitted a degree from Arkansas State University, or if it would have been from a local prestigious university, right? Like they don't care. They wanted me to get a degree, and that was inside of one of their approved degrees. There was a list of like 200 schools that I could choose from. And I literally went school by school and contacted them and said, how much does your degree program cost? And I chose the cheapest one. Now, is that the right move? I don't know, but I came out of that thing with a specialist degree with paying $15,000 total between the two, masters and specialist. And I bumped up pretty significantly on the pay scale. So I think to answer your question, I would say, first of all, decide what you're doing it for. Second of all, I would say, are there options out there where you can go that are cheaper than what you're currently looking at? And then thirdly, if you do actually need to take student loans, then make sure that it fits as part of your plan. Currently, there's still, with all the information that we have today, and this could change. So this is an area that I don't know 100% about, but right now the rules are that if you do a consolidation of your loans, it's a weighted average consolidation. So what that means is if you have 80 credits on your undergrad loans and you take out new loans that will start off at 0, you can consolidate those together and get the weighted average, which would bring your 80 credits way down, right? You wouldn't get as many credits on those. But overall, your time frame to paying on any loans would be reduced. And the reason why that's important to at least consider is because if you have a $300 a month payment on this repayment assistance program or the old IBR, any repayment plan, right? If it's based on income, it's not based on your loan size. It's not based on your loan amount. So if I'm starting at 0 today on graduate loans, and I say, okay, I've got a 10-year window, 120 payments that I have to make, you have to make all 120 payments inside of your income, not based on the loan size. If you can bring that number from 120 down to, let's say, 90 or 85 or 80, that's going to reduce the amount of money that you pay overall. Now, pre-2020, this is where it gets a little bit little bit hairy and a little bit tricky. If you did a consolidation before 2020, you went down to zero. They were wiped out, wiped clean. You had to start completely over. The language is still on studentaid.gov today that says weighted consolidation, weighted average consolidation. But they could easily change that, because I don't think that's something that they really want moving forward. But I don't know. But as of today, it's in there. And if anybody needs that, I've taken screenshots.
So in that case, you wouldn't want to consolidate. You would want to continue to pay on the original loans. Would you have two separate PSLF, two separate 10-year tracks?
Exactly. So that's the way it was before 2020. Was you had the old
this is so crazy
PSLF track. So that consolidation right now is tricky, because they're not. It's written on the page. It's written into studentaid.gov, but there's a lot of questions on if they're going to actually keep that moving forward, and are they going to pull that someday without telling anybody, and then all of a sudden say like, oh, you have to start back at zero. That's a question that I battle over a lot whenever I talk to people. But as of today, it's still there. It's in there on their website. I've taken screenshots, so that way I have it as like we're doing a consolidation today, and I'm screenshotting this thing with the date on there, so that way we can use that if need be. But that consolidation would bring down the overall amount of money that you have to pay if the weighted average comes into play.
Wow, that's really interesting, but also a little scary. The considerations here are crazy. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then if Dan has anything, great, and then whatever you want to leave us with, great. I feel like we have an obligation to address things that get trending on TikTok as they relate to finances, because there is so much misinformation and disinformation on TikTok as it relates to financial planning, finances, loans. I remember there was one trending a couple months ago. Oh, because Elon Musk might have accessed a data file at the Department of Education, your loans are automatically forgiven. You can just write in a letter, and he broke a law, so your loans are magically forgiven. I saw this video over and over, and I'm like, wow, you have to be really gullible to think that would be amazing. That's not going to happen. But the one that I keep getting now, I don't know why they keep targeting, probably because I just keep watching till the end of the video, which is I should stop. But it fascinates me, is the perpetual borrower. So the way that I'm sorry, not the perpetual borrower, the perpetual learner. So the strategy here is that they will always be in school at enough credits to always have their loan in deferral. So basically taking a community college classes toward a 2-year degree, and then just constantly switching that 2-year degree and always being in school, I guess, until the day they die. I don't know what happens when they get dementia and can no longer do the classes, but like, what? This seems like a really crazy way to get your loans deferred forever, but it seems like a lot of work, and like also something they might stop. Have you heard this? What are your thoughts?
I don't have TikTok, but I've heard of people talking about that before. And I think it's one of those where, to your point, it's great when it works. And then if it doesn't, and you have like, are they taking out more loans each semester too? It's like, like.
Not necessarily. They're using the lifetime learning credit to offset the community college stuff, but like, that could go away. I mean, they're taking very cheap classes. So maybe in California, I could take 2 community classes in California for like $150. So It's not that much.
I think it's one of those where there's always going to be like a trick, right? And that's one of the interesting things in my side of things too, is like trying to find some of those legal tricks too. And if it works and it works for you, then great. To me, that doesn't seem like something that I would want to do long term. But even going back and doing classes now, and I don't know like if there's requirements as far as grades or anything like that. It sounds to me like it would be a lot to continually do that for year after year. But I could see that being a popular trend for people who are in their 20s and maybe early 30s, but there comes a point where I'm like, I don't want to do that kind of stuff. Like,
No.
and now I don't want to pay on the loans either. Like I get that part of it, that some of the loan balances and if you're making a good income, like the amount that you have to pay is unreal. So I could see trying to find some loopholes like that. But yeah, for me, a lot of the things that there's a term that I was thinking about, and I just lost it. But essentially, it's the how much does it cost for your time and energy, right? Like
Right.
return on we got ROI, return on investment. Oh, it's ROH, return on hassle. That's what I was looking for. And so sometimes the return on hassle is not worth it. There's so many things, even Scott, that you know about or know of in the financial planning world, where it's like we can optimize down to the best possible thing, but is it actually worth it? Like there are people out there that I know, and I'm going to get blasted for this, I'm sure. But it's like chasing high yield savings account interest
Right.
rates. And it's
Right.
like, okay, even if we're talking about $100,000 in a high yield savings account, we're talking about $20 a year or 15 or $30. And I don't care at that point to chase that kind of now. Can you make a little bit of money off of it? Yeah. Same thing with like churning bank accounts. Like, yes, there's money to be made. I don't want to do it, but somebody out there will do it. And I think that's probably the same thing with this is like there will be people that will take advantage of it and figure out how to do that well. It's not something that I would want to do, but more power to them if it works.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of work for I don't know. Yeah. I just these are the things that I see in my time on TikTok that I think we need to address. So,
David, you said, you did not care about what you learned at Arkansas State, but I do have one question. Were you engaged enough to know the name of your mascot?
Oh man,
What was Arkansas State?
I did know at one point in time, and now I'm not going to probably remember.
isn't it like a hog or something like that?
It
Or
is
is
not
that
a hawk. You're
not
thinking
a
of
hog?
Arkansas, the Razorbacks,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Tell me what it is, Dan.
the Red Wolves.
Red Wolves,
You're a
yes.
red wolf, David.
Red Wolf. That's yeah. I don't really claim them that much. But yes, a Red Wolf.
David, you are unbelievably generous with your information and your time. Are you still taking clients solely to work on student loan issues, or is it more part of your financial planning? Because I know people listening might be interested in wanting to work with you. Do you want to describe the services you provide and how you can be contacted?
I still do one-off student loan plans. They have gone significantly down as I've taken on more and more clients from the comprehensive side. But I do ongoing financial planning as well, which is basically looking at the whole picture and how student loans play into them into the picture of overall finances. But with that being said, some people just want student loan help, and I'm happy to do that too. Probably where I would push people the most though is my blog. Anytime that there's something new that comes up, especially with student loans, I will create a blog post and get that out. And then the other thing would be I've got a newsletter that comes out almost every week, and and that would be a good thing for people to jump on too, because I always talk about the trending topics and things that are happening in the student loan world in that newsletter as well.
Do you want to go ahead and say where they can find that blog post and how they can sign up for that newsletter? And is your business called K-12 Planning?
K-12 planning, yes. So the website is www.k-12planning.com. K-12 planning turns out was or K something with the non-dash would have been probably better, but that was taken. So K-12 planning. And then there's a million places on that website to sign up for the newsletter, but we could also include that in the show notes. I'll send you a direct link
Yeah, do that,
to,
David.
to the newsletter.
Fantastic. David, do you have an estimation and I'm not sure if you've kept this data on how much money you have saved clients in student loans? Because I should remind our audience, we did an event with you, and I believe you saved a couple of the people who had shared information before the event in the 10 to $30,000 range, I think. Do you remember that? And that's before maybe other people from that event then went ahead and contacted you.
Yeah, I think one of the people on that call was a $70,000 person that got
Okay,
their.
I remember it being big. Yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhere right around the ballpark of 16 to 17 million dollars is how much I've helped,
Boom.
and that's with people that have gone through with the full student loan plan, and
David,
so
you have a new nickname. You're the $16 million man.
at one
Our
point in
younger
time, I think
audience will have
we
no
had an
idea what I'm
episode that's called
referring
the $8
to.
million man.
Yeah, I don't know who still remembers the $6 million man. But oh my God,
And
David.
then, I've done, I do, well, every year for the last 3 years, I've done a webinar for the Next Gen Personal Finance. I
Fantastic.
do presentations for school districts from across the country, and
Oh,
then podcasts and different events. So I'm guessing that if like it's impossible to know how many people were like the trickle effect from that, but it's been very, very rewarding and very great to
wow.
be to help so many people get, especially with the system that feels like it's been designed to kick us down a little bit.
Agree. It's so great to have people like you involved in this. We're always asked if we know how much we've saved people just by our advocacy and, getting people to consider low cost options and get out of the high cost options. We will never know. It's the same with Tim Ranzetta and NGPF. He can never know the impact he made. And it's easy, I think, to get a little down about what's going on, but I think people like Tim, people like you, and we try our best here. I think there is some good in the world. David, thank you for all you do.
Yeah, I think I'll say one more quick thing, but I think a
Sure.
lot of what we do is very similar to being a teacher, right? Where sometimes
Mm,
you don't hear the effect of it for several years or maybe
yes.
20 years down the road. Some kid comes up to you and says, "Hey, you made a massive impact on my life," and you're like, "Oh well, that was a year that I would have really liked to have heard that back then, but thank you for telling me, 20 years from now." But that I've had a bunch of those kids come back at various points and say like, "Oh, you were such a great teacher. You helped me so much." And you're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that I had that impact on you at that point in time." So when people come and tell, like, I'll have people that will email me and say like, "Oh, I listened to you on a podcast and then followed your directions and got all my loans forgiven." I'm like, "Oh man, that makes it all worth it right there."
Well, it's funny you would say that. I have a screenshot of a LinkedIn note I got from a former student, one of my favorite students. He loved soccer. His family was Dutch, and we would play soccer like at the break. And he was one of these kids I absolutely remember. And I got this message from him. This is several months ago, and we're trying to get our schedules together so I can go see him. But he said, Mr. Otter was sitting with my kids, his own kids, and who asked me who my favorite elementary teacher was. Naturally, the only footballer teacher, soccer fan at McKinley Elementary. That's the school. That's also the school where I learned about the 403B. They asked if I had a photo. I said no, but LinkedIn knows everyone. I hope you are well. Maybe you remember me from your fourth grade class sometime in the 90s. Best, and then the kid's name. I tell you what, it made my month when I got this. And anyway, so you're absolutely right. We pay it forward, and we might not always get those pats on the back. But again, that's not why we do it. I think we do it because we enjoy it.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You bet. You are the best, David. Thank you.